We have Pastor Anne Marie Hayden. You want to wave your hands up there? Pastor Anne Marie is in Oklahoma. We've got Dwayne Leverett in New Jersey, and of course, yours truly. So Pastor Anne Marie, just a short bio. She is a staff pastor in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. She is a survivor advocate. She is also serving the Tulsa Task Force for Human Trafficking. She is a can abolition advocate for her church and district, the Oklahoma Ministry Network. And then she also is working on a project. She's going to share what she can. And so we're really excited to learn more. Again, not just what this is information that we hope becomes an inspiration for all of us together. So, and then we have Dwayne Leverett. He's, in addition to his pastoral ministry and church planning, he is a jail chaplain, co-founder of CAN. He has a background in financial services. He also serves on multiple boards. Again, all of these things are really relevant to what we're going to talk about today. So he served on the Hackensack City Planning Board, the Warren County Economic Development Board, School Board, Bergen County Council of Churches that oversees all of the institutional chaplaincy for the county. Hoving Home, we helped bring Hoving Home into the state, but he served on the national board for Hoving Home, which is for addicted females, serves victims of human trafficking, and serves women with children. And then also he is served on the county board for Family Promise. That's going to come up today. Pregnancy centers and a number of other nonprofits. He's got quite a wealth of experience. Of course, I'm Mandy Leverett, co-founder of CAN, Church and Community Abolition Network, Assemblies of God nationally appointed, AGUSM, church-based anti-trafficking since the 80s. So you become with a lot of depth and breadth of experience. And then I have multiple skill sets because of a unique dual call that God gave me when I was a kid. And I actually spent a month before I came to New Jersey. I spent a month working at the LA Dream Center, what was becoming the Dream Center. Again, they right now, keep them in prayer, they are housing so many people that are displaced in Los Angeles. We're just praying that the fire abates. Again, it's an amazing church-based resource doing great work in Los Angeles. And then we've partnered as well with Project Rescue. So those are just some things about our different speakers I wanted to mention. And so let's start off the conversation. We'll start with Anne Marie. I want everyone to kind of share how we met each other. So Anne Marie, if you want to start us off.
Well, yeah, honestly, I am just, I'm not going to say just, I'm the most important thing I am and the most important thing I've done is discover who I am in Christ. And so I am a child of God, and I am uniquely created by him for the works that he has produced in advance of me. So I'm just walking this out like all of us are, with a passion to do something for something that breaks my Father's heart. And in that work, I've participated in a lot of 101s. I've jumped on board with anything that might be related to people that are hurting, and I felt the call of God on. And certainly that was one of the things that how I encountered Mandy. We were doing a seek and save here in Oklahoma, and part of that seek and save was the work of Can Freedom and the search for missing children. And I was just so honored to meet her and hear her passion, the work that she's been doing for so long, and the successes that they have seen in finding so many children. I'm so grateful for that, being a vulnerable child myself. And in each of the work that I've found myself in, I've begun to discover that the things that happened to me as a vulnerable child actually had a very ugly name, and that name is trafficking. So I come to you also as a survivor, as a victorious survivor, and one of the best things I get to do is walk out a journey with any one of the people that God has placed in my life who has had experiences in these areas.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm so glad I got to meet you. And then we continue to work together, and I'm so grateful for what God has done in your life, not just in your healing and restoration, but in how you help others that are stuck to get unstuck. And you've taken me out to some of the best food, Thai fusion. we had some fun, some of the best tacos.
Taco truck.
Yes, taco trucks, the best. I grew up in Southern California, and like the taco trucks, whether they were in Tijuana or like, they're always the best. But what's interesting is when I was actually in Oklahoma a year before in Oklahoma City for the first Seek and Save that they asked us to lead. We've led 4 Seek and Saves, and to this date, 59 of the children from those 4 Seek and Saves have been found, which we're just so grateful to God for. But when I was getting ready to leave, we had at the end of a Seek and Save, there's a big block party and lots going on. And I was praying for people in a prayer tent, and a mom came up, and she had a few children, young children. And she was like, can you guys pray for me? Because I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. And so we had, and again, I'm not from Oklahoma, so I had to troubleshoot there, troubleshoot on my layover flight. And we were just working with local resources. There were lots of resources that just were at max capacity, weren't available. We had to work with tribal resources, had to kind of work creatively just to sustain our. We had a missionary that was from Mexico that was visiting, that helped kind of do the footwork while I was on the plane. And so we patched together resources to sustain her immediately and then ongoing, because we knew how vulnerable she was and her children were, in the situation. So we were there a year before I met Anne Marie, and then here we meet Anne Marie, and I learned from her that God had put on her heart a solution to house families. So it's something that I don't know how much you can share, but it's something that you've been working toward. And I'm like, what God put on your heart, we needed on the other part of Oklahoma the year before. So, in Christianity, it talks about, we're a many membered body. And so it's not just to one organization or one person, but it's really what we can all bring to the table together. And so I was so encouraged when I met you, not just doing the outreach there in Tulsa, but in Oklahoma City. I'm like, oh, you're building a resource that's going to help, people throughout the state that are in dire need. So grateful for you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can comment on that.
Well, I sure I can. I mean,
Okay.
I certainly speak to the heart of it. So in doing the work, and honestly, the work is just to be available, to be led by the Spirit, and to go in scared sometimes into a situation, and be curious, seeking relationship with people that may not be seen by most, stepping into those situations and just learning more about a person's life, and dreams, and also some of the hurts that have come along the way. But focusing on the dreams, my distinct pleasure has been to try to find resources. So whether it's an emergency need, finding them a place of emergency shelter, or it's a food need, finding them a place where food is available to them, but then also digging into their lives together, and identifying what are their giftings, what are their passions, what has God built within them from the beginning, that we can come alongside her and her children, or him. My husband is one of my partners, and walk that out with them so that they can see the fullness of God, as He planned all along. He didn't plan for anything that happened to them to happen, but He certainly had a plan for their redemption, and their fullness. So I'm so grateful that some of the things I've seen are gaps. And I say grateful because it's an opportunity, right? When we see a problem, it's an opportunity. And when what is it in Romans when it says when troubles come, we consider them an opportunity, and we grow our endurance. So we keep pressing forward in these areas. So what we've seen is there's not a lot of emergency beds, but there are some. And what happens in these emergency shelters is the women are loved on. There's wraparound services for them while they're there. There's even non-residential services for them once they leave. But oftentimes when they leave, what we're finding is they're finding themselves in public housing, or they're finding themselves back living with family that may be not as safe as we would like them to be. And they're not finding themselves in a place that lifts them up to that next level to begin advancing themselves, or surrounded by people that would press forward with them into the next. So what we need is more residential housing opportunities for that next level, for when women and children come out of emergency situations, or when women and children are found in a vulnerable state, or families. Don't want to exclude families, because certainly that's God's heart, is the family. When they're found in vulnerable states, and we know where vulnerabilities exist, is where predators thrive, where they come in and they seek to fill a need, but really there's a personal agenda, and that's when trafficking occurs. That's when exploitation occurs. So that's where addictions start to take over. So we need housing solutions, not just here in Oklahoma, but all across the country. We believe this is a church advance, that these housing solutions are available, where they have wraparound communities that we're coming in, helping them identify their giftings, helping them with budgeting, helping them with, how to meal prep, things that I wasn't taught as a little girl. And as I've grown up, I've wished that I had been taught those things. And I've come in at a disadvantage, where people have come alongside me and say, hey, I know how to do this. I can help you out. So what I want to see is, I want to see a multiplication in the freedom that I found, in community, a church community coming around, not just one, but each of us coming around a one, because we know that that's what Jesus did. And we know that's where the solution is. So housing communities like this for families that are vulnerable, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and for induction phase, reentry phase, all of that, we're going to talk about some of the solutions that we've been able to help build locally and through in other states as well. I just wanted to, Dwayne, how did we meet? Just put it out there. I have this question: how did you meet? So,
I was we were doing a community. Well, I'll just make it shorter. I was a youth pastor. She was a children's pastor at a church, and the church was in the urban city. And Mandy doesn't play basketball as well. She thinks she does, and she got
oh,
hurt.
oh,
And she got hurt, and so because she got hurt, she needed somebody to drive her around for a couple of weeks, and one thing led to another. Next thing next month it'll be 25 years we've been married. So,
come
um,
on.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Two
but really,
kids later.
the short version I usually say is, if you've seen the movie Shrek, that's me and my husband. Only there, there wasn't a fire-breathing dragon, and I am all of the versions of Fiona and then Donkey, and he has literally palmed my face. So. But we actually met before you joined the church plant. We were leading for our seat. The first ever, it's an outreach that's actually part of Seek and Save. It's called the Convoy of Hope. It's like the block party situation and the grocery giveaway and that kind of thing. We were helping organize that for the first one that happened in the state of New Jersey. And then you joined our church planning team. And then from there, it's all the things. But yeah, he literally said, we were at a youth all-nighter with the kids, and I was in one room playing basketball. He was in the other room with a different youth pastor playing volleyball. It was a heated match, and one of our girls went in and said, Pastor Mandy hurt her knee, and you're famous. What did you say? What did you go tell her to
walk it off?
Go tell her to walk it off. And then I needed surgery. So then he drove out of his way to pick me up. And so that's how we got to know each other. So, because we were being bivocational church plants, it's really planters. It's very, you don't have a moment really. So I have a list here now. Part of the lead up there, I said there's like 24 causes, individual causes for homelessness, but for most people, it's multiple ones. So I want everyone to listen to. I just made a list of about 100, and think about the people that you, Dwayne, and you, Pastor Anne-Marie, the people you've served and things that you've experienced, and see what rings true with you. So the first one is traveler syndrome. Traveler syndrome, if you're not familiar with it, it's a compulsion to keep moving. You can't stay in one place too long. A lot of times these individuals will jump on the trains that go coast to coast and that kind of thing. It's a real thing. I've seen it in our families' lives. Injury, illness, fire, hurricane, tornado, floods, mudslides, so natural disasters. And arson along with that. Sometimes a natural disaster and a fire, sometimes it's an arson situation. We have eminent domain, unemployment, underemployment, disability, inequality, inadequate or no retirement, inadequate life insurance, death of a caregiver, parent, or spouse, substance addiction, gambling, injury, mental illness, PTSD, government experimentation, closing a government shelters, closing government mental health institutions, predatory lending or the housing bubble, gentrification, inflation, pandemic, pregnancy. Some people are kicked out of their home because they're pregnant. No family, orphan, foster care, layoffs, incarceration, lack of essential skills, disability, lawsuit, medical debt, medicine costs, prejudice, drug addiction, alcoholism, arson, aging out of the foster care system, defunded, I already said that one, trauma, unhealed SA, I don't know if I can say this on it, pedo, I'll just say pedo, war, debt bondage, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, forced marriage, phobias, persecution, unsafe shelters, no place for pets. That's a big one. Cults, imprisonment, domestic violence, no health insurance, and even the mandated fees, which I believe have been alleviated. Sometimes that was the driving factor to cause people to be homeless. No disaster, fire, or flood insurance, infectious disease, federal, state block of relief reaching victims, eviction, rent increase, mold or lacking of your shelter maintenance, hoarding, mass contamination. You guys remember that in Ohio, there was the train and all of the, like, we've seen that more than once, where it contaminated a whole area in the United States. And so it was an unlivable situation. So these are just off the top of my head, 100 different individual causes. Now, again, for most people, it is a mixture of those causes. I mean, for us, we had a situation where Hurricane Irene came in and then someone fraudulently cashed our insurance check and we had to battle for a year and a half to get access to the thing that helped us to move back into our home. And we came to the party late, so all the hotels were filled. All of our friends and neighbors and people we knew, their homes were filled or flooded. So we were in a pretty hard situation, and each night we didn't know where our small family would have to go, because there was literally no room in the inn. It's not too far from Christmas. So those things can really happen to anyone. You know, Pastor Matt Barnett, who founded the Dream Center, and that's housing a lot of people right now in Los Angeles, his home burnt, and he had to go to the Dream Center to get help himself. So these causes really can happen to anyone. So I'm just wondering, as I read off that long list, what things come to your mind, Dwayne and Pastor Anne Marie, that you think, wow, definitely we see that a lot. Oh, that when you said that really rings true. Can you just mention a few things that you're like, yeah, definitely? And if you're in the chat, you can put it in the chat, the things that just really ring true with, yes, we've experienced that, or I know someone who's experienced that.
That was a big list, Mandy. And it's an unfortunate list that it's a big list, right? Because it's true. These are lists of vulnerabilities. And again, where vulnerabilities exist, it exists that, that even a deeper level of vulnerability. So for me, I mean, so many of them, I was just like, yep. And when I'm yepping, I'm thinking of faces and names and situations. But honestly, and I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but personally, mine was generational abuse, domestic violence, and child sexual abuse in the home. And that's my personal experience. What led to our homelessness from my mom and my little sister and I were on the streets because for years she had been molested by her father, and for years I had been molested by her father and other members of the family. family. And she was just looking for a way out. And a way out to her was on the streets, because there was no other family that was not affected by this trauma that lived as a normality in our home, in our spaces. So we left, and actually when we left, against our will. We were kicked out on the streets because mom wasn't being compliant with the things that her father wanted to occur in his home. And so we were on the streets, and that is what led to us being homeless, and then subsequently led to the addictions that then led to me being groomed and trafficked.
Yeah. It's interesting because some states, not all states, but some states just simply being homeless. Can you hear me okay? This went down a little bit. Some states, just being homeless as a family, you can lose your children to the foster care just because you're homeless, even if you're in the car or whatever, and that can be enough. Some states that can't be the only thing, but many states. So families are kind of afraid to ask for help because they're afraid that you're going to report and take their children. And sometimes, unfortunately, very bad things can happen to children in foster care. And we have stories of our survivors that have come out of those situations. But again, the more we can catch healthy families and help them during stints of homelessness, because it really can happen to anyone's family. I think of our time at Family Promise. My family 1 year volunteered over 500 hours, and we hosted Family Promise. How many of you are familiar with Family Promise? Just raise your hand. If your picture's on, raise your hand. Yeah, an amazing resource that started in the 80s, about the same time I assisted my first victim of human trafficking, which, by the way, was a homeless veteran who brought a homeless teenager into my life, and because I led a prayer meeting. So this issue of homelessness really resonates all over the place. But she was, so we ended up this particular year. It was after we were out of our home for a year and a half. Our church we started hosting Family Promise. And if you're not familiar with, everyone is a little different. They're affiliates. It was started back in the 80s with a woman named Karen, who was from New Jersey, and she had a meeting in New York City. It started with an encounter with a homeless woman on the streets of New York City, and she gave that individual a sandwich, heard her story, and then just said, well, maybe we can do something more. And her family started giving sandwiches on a regular basis, took it upon herself. Then she said, you know what, they need showers. Can we connect with the local YMCA? Can we house individuals in churches? Can we do this? And she pieced together what is now called Family Promise. And some of the Family Promises have hotels that they put the families in. In our case, our county, we house them in churches. Our church had showers, and it had a school previously. So it had guys showers, girls showers, and a kitchen and that kind of thing. So we would take care of them. They had a centralized location that they used for the office for the parents, and helped give them job skills and those kind of wraparound services that Anne Marie was talking about. But it's just one of those responses that organically came together. And it's one of our partners really in over the years, not just for the one that we were on the board of in New Jersey, but also I was at a board meeting we were at a national every 2-year meeting in Ohio with our denomination, and there was a homeless individual that was on the street, and we were walking in between these big auditoriums, and I just noticed, and I thought, well, I'm not from Columbus, Ohio, but I bet you I could find a resource more than just giving this person a sandwich. I bet you we could find a sustainable resource. And all it took was an hour of calls. An hour, you leave messages. It took an hour, and we found a family. In this case, Dream Centers, Family Promises, Salvation Armies, all the typical things you think of. We found a family Promise in a couple counties away, but this was a very unique situation. This was, again, bringing families together. This individual was a young man, and he didn't have any other underlying issues. He came to Columbus for his father's funeral, and his father was the caregiver for his son, who was an adult, who was this young man's brother, and he was autistic. And he just said, if we go to any of the systems, the the shelter systems oftentimes are unsafe. A lot of rape and things happen in the bathroom, so people usually don't want to go to those. He was concerned if he went to a medical facility or something, he would be institutionalized. They didn't want that. So with that criteria, again, I made some calls and it took an hour. But one family promise actually in Ohio. They classified family so broad, because usually family, you need to have a minor to fit in a lot of family promises situations. But this unique situation fit with that. And so just sticking around, figuring it out, and there's a permanent path forward, right? So when we talk about building a comprehensive response, it's about those wraparound services. It's about the connections we have. The church, like Anne Marie was talking about, the church has so many resources, mentorship. We have people that have businesses and have different skill sets. And in a reentry home, that kind of resource, you can leverage those resources more because you don't have all of the security issues of an entry-level home, that kind of thing. So keeping families together, that's an important part of it for what you're developing, Pastor Emery, in your area. Family promise. Of course, we mentioned Hoving Home, women with children. Yep, go ahead.
One of the things too about family promise, and I was on the board, and we were some that initiated it. And a couple things that happened that which wasn't on your list was generational homelessness, where where it's taught to be homeless. So we had folks come in, and we had a family promise that we were on had a pretty strong program. You'd come in, we'd work with you on getting everything you needed for your family, for your kids, and then we would help you get a job. And once you got a job, we would take some of the funds and we would put it away for you. So we were taking a quarter of what you made and putting it away for you, so that you learn to live off of. You learn how to budget. You learn how to live off the funds. You learn how to do everything, so that when you're ready after several months, you had enough money for a down payment for an apartment. You're used to taking 25% of your funds and putting it towards paying for rent and paying for everything. I'm sorry, I'm told. Can you guys hear me? Are you hear me, or am I too loud? Or all right, so what happens is, one of the issues with it, especially in this country, especially in some of these areas, is generational. So we had people in, and one of the mothers would call this woman with her children and say, "What are you doing? Why are you going through this program?" Because we were training you and giving skills. She's like, "Just go to the shelter for a certain amount of time, and then the shelter will give you the shelter will set you up where you can get temporary housing assistance, which you can get an apartment for 2 years. And then once you get that, you could get rent, you could get income, you get health care." And that was what they would do. So they would do this for 2 years. And then when their 2 years was up, they would move out, they'd go someplace else, and they'd be in the shelter for, I think it was, if you were in the shelter for 3 months, then you could apply for this whole program again. And that's
Yep.
all they were doing. And they were teaching their kids, this is how you do it. So they would get health care, they'd get a nice apartment, they get stipends, they get bus passes, and they didn't have to work, they didn't have to do anything. So you'd go by and you'd see what's happening, and it was just a mindset. So one of the things that we come across is the mindset and the understanding that we need to overcome, and just let people know that the government taking care of you isn't the way you do it. There's a better hope and a better opportunity for you. And that's one of the things that a lot of folks just don't understand. But that generational attitude of, the government's going to take care of me. So it was almost like your job. They didn't have a job, but their job was working the system and understanding how the system worked to put it together. And you have some experts in it. And the biggest thing is, when you have a family, for lack of a better word, graduate, where they've both been working, they've been putting the money away, and now all of a sudden they have enough for a down payment for rent, and then they have money left over so they could buy some new furniture, and they could put money into savings. And then they come in and they tell you they have their budget, they have everything done, and they tell you that now they're saving up for a car. So it's a very strong. The idea isn't just to give someone a home. The old idea, if give someone a fish, you feed them for a day, teach them fish, you feed them for life. But the idea was simply to make stronger members of our community. And so it's not just, so there's a lot of things. So when we start talking about homeless, I don't want to get caught up, especially in the jail too, because coming from the jail, A lot of the guys, their families might be in Section 8, and with Section 8, depending on what their charges were, and even if they're released or on probation, they can't go and live with their family. So they have to go find a way that they could get afford an apartment so they could have their whole family together. I just want the understanding of the idea that when I consider homelessness, it's not about just providing a shelter over someone's head in a situation, but it's raising them up in a manner that they can be participating members of a community.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Pastor Dwayne. That's exactly what we're talking about. It's not just band-aiding a situation, but getting to the root, and helping them identify that the foundation, the real foundation that's around them. The reality is that we're all in survival mode. It's just a matter of what tools and options do we feel like we have readily available to us to live this life in this broken world that we're in, right? And unfortunately, those that are less vulnerable feel either less worthy or in actuality have less options available to them. So it's our job to come into those situations. Those of us that know better, more information, that have more to share with the others and say, what do you have? What does the community around us have? I'm reminded of the story in Second Kings of the widow, and her sons were being sold into slavery to pay off their father's debt. And what did she do? She went to the church. She went to the church and she said, I need help. And he said, well, what do you have? Because it's about empowering them. It's not just taking care of it for them, but helping them see what options are available to them and helping them along the way with what choices they make. They know best what their life situation is currently and what steps they want to take. So that's called being trauma informed. So if you hear that buzzword out there right now, that's what we're talking about, helping people make the choices that are best for them. But the reality is most people in vulnerable situations don't feel like they have many options, but they do. They just need others to come along and say, you are worth it. This is available to you. I'm willing to help you walk through that if this is your choice. And I know others. So let's go in the community and let's gather all the vessels. Let's bring them into the space and create space for God to move, because he will. As Christians, as Jesus followers, we know that will happen. His promises are true, but we don't have to be, but he wants us to be a part of these solutions. And so he's appointed us to places and spaces that only individually can we go into to help others be found, honestly.
Yeah. I just want to challenge those that are listening right now, even listening in the future, to think about what Pastor Anne-Marie and what Dwayne just said. No matter what and what you have and your experiences, but also what you have. Think about what you know, that someone that didn't learn those things, like Pastor Anne-Marie was saying, I had to learn these basic things, and what might you might not be an expert in X, Y, and Z, but what do you know that you could mentor a family in? I want you to consider that, because that's valuable. That's exactly what we're talking about here, bringing those skill sets. When we help build a comprehensive response, we have a church, we train them initially, it's pretty comprehensive in our training of the trainers, but then they're building a team. They're asking their team, hey, what do you have? In fact, in the Bible, that story, but it was every story of God used people to prevent slavery or lead people out of slavery. God always used what was in their hand, and most of them, it was the tools of their trades, right? So what is your skill set? You may think, oh, this doesn't have any direct application. You would be surprised. We worked with a national bank. We said, because employment is part of that step forward. Let's step back. Housing security is a big issue. Food security. So many of us on the screen right now have food pantries in our organizations, in our communities, in our churches. Food insecurity is a vulnerability to human trafficking. But so providing that, but also helping people have a good employment going forward, giving them the skills that maybe they never learned in school or they never learned from their family. Budgeting, basic financial literacy, these kinds of things are invaluable. And home security, housing security. I can tell you, I was raised by a single mom. When I was little, elementary age, we had to move a lot because housing, affordable housing wasn't always available. Sometimes it was shorter term than we would have liked. But we were in a home, renting a house. Unbeknownst to us, we were paying our rent, but it was going into foreclosure because the owners weren't paying the mortgage with our rent. So all of a sudden, we were out of a house and on the streets. We were in a new state, so we didn't really know that many people. But we had a family member who lived quite a bit away. And she's like, I got an extra room. Your family of 4 can stay in my room. And that was our community catch net. But had she not been there, we would have been on the streets. And that aunt, she was an aunt, she helped us in that season. We were there for a few months. And then my mom learned about this thing called first time home buyers program. Anybody hear about that before? I'm going to have Dwayne in a minute comment on that. But for me, it was a game changer. That we never had to move again. It was a $10,000 home. Like that, it doesn't even, like, you can't buy a shed for $10,000. It was a $10,000 home. We had to come up with $2,000 down, but it was a game changer. And then our home became the first home where I assisted that first victim of human trafficking. We were able to help be a catch net for other family members and community members. We leveraged our home for that. And so it's just remarkable to see how one thing can lead to another. So when we talk about first-time home buyers, Dwayne, can you tell us what that looks like? Who can apply for that? Do you have to be a family?
Generally, it's someone who has not had a home, and in some cases, it may not be you haven't had a home for 3 years. So you have the opportunity to go in between, depending on your credit score and the circumstances in the states and the depending where you are. In some cases, it's as little as 5% down. Some it's 3.5. Some it's 10% down, which normally you need to put 20% down, or in some cases 25% down. But if you can get into the home, let's just say, show you the difference. If you're looking at a $200,000 home and you have to come up with $50,000, as opposed to, let's just say, you now you only have to come up with $5,000 to $10,000, and then there's some programs too that all the closing costs they'll give you as a grant, or the company will grant it back. So all you have to really come up with is 5% down to get into a home, a brand new home. And I mean, the payments are the rates are a little higher, what have you, but they make sure just by on the calculations that you can afford it, because they don't want you to go into something and then be out of it in 10 years or whatever. They make sure that you can afford it. And it may not be, like Mandy said, it may not be a huge home, but being in an apartment or being in somebody else's house and not having your own, it does a lot for you. One, the first thing it does is makes you part of a community. So now you're not just somebody that's, oh, you're stay at their house. You're part of a community now in a home, and it gives us stability. For children, it's a very important thing that the children of a family have that stability, knowing that this is our home. This isn't somebody else's home. This isn't that. We could move. We could be kicked out. We could do. This is it, and you can see them growing up in a community, going through a whole school system because of that stability, and it will help them with their studies, with everything. You're doing a lot more for your family, for your children when you have that. First time home buyers is there. There's other programs that if you don't qualify, they'll make you sit into, well, not make you, but you have the opportunity to go into a class that might be 6 weeks long, and they teach you about budgeting, they teach you about everything, and they give you some milestones that if you hit these milestones, then you can get a certificate and you can move into it. You have HUD. There's so many places that understand the value of making someone a part of the community, in homes and in Habitat for Humanity, all these areas, because they know that they make a stronger person, a stronger family, and a stronger community by doing that. And so those are things that when we start looking at, looking at some of the reasons people are homeless, that we might be like able to say, let's get you on a track so that not only do you have that, but you have your own place. There's also something called Community Redevelopment Act, CRA, where when they build large condominium sites that they have to have some for people who have lower income, and they sell them at the lower income. And in some cases, it might take a year to two. We had a friend who filled out the form, and 2 years later she got it. But she's still there. It was years to have your own condominium in one of it, and it's not just like in a really bad neighborhood. It was in a very nice neighborhood in a very nice condominium. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to look at and hope for and pray, and as Henri said, to walk beside somebody to encourage them, because even though these opportunities are there, they're not easy to always walk through. They're not easy to always, there's many opportunities for discouragement. There's many opportunities for things to happen. But like Mandy said, look at Mandy here. Her mother was able to get this, and how everything was changed because her mother was able to get this. And this is something that, because of the effect it had on Mandy, I've seen in her mother and her, that all their lives, they didn't call it helping human trafficking, but they've always done it. They've always helped somebody get out of this situation, get some into the circumstance. And that's what you're doing when you start building these kind of communities. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off like that.
No,
No,
that's
you're
wonderful.
exactly right, Dwayne. That's what I was going to say is, man, we're not unlike anyone that's on this call or anyone that sits in a pew in a church, except we're just trying to find more resources and connecting. We're linking up with others around us that also want to make a difference. Maybe you're starting a little group at your church that just wants to talk about it, just wants to learn more about it. Hey, I'm going to do an HT 101 class, a human trafficking 101 class. Do you want to do it with me? We'll put it on together at my house. Invite a couple of other people along with you, and then start talking about the problems you're seeing and how you are uniquely gifted and how you might be able to make a difference. Look at the solutions that are available in your community. There are people doing the work, and I promise you that there are people that are breaking their back to do the work. We have nonprofit ministry leaders that are working in silos. They're all by themselves, with very little and very thin volunteers. And when I say that, the volunteers, they come and then they go. I mean, there's no real depth to their commitment there. So what I would say is find your giftings. Most churches, I know mine does, as Assemblies of God, we have next steps, or we have what we call growth track. We're in those classes. We identify what our giftings are, what our spiritual giftings are, what our personalities are, and that helps us identify where God has called us. We also talk about our life. Where has God called you, and where are you uniquely gifted, and how can you lend that, not just in the church, but in your community? How can you link up with others that are either like your body part or connecting body parts to you, that you can go out and make a difference? I heard, and then just being informed, as you learn, keep learning. I'm still learning. I know Mandy and Dwayne would also say they're still learning. This is a multifaceted problem, but it's also a multidisciplinary solution. We're all involved in this solution. We all have to make it our priority to make this world a better place. And that's coming alongside our brothers and sisters that are disadvantaged. And so what I want to say is, one of the things I thought about when you were talking, Dwayne, was a group called Safe Families. That I've really come alongside and love the work they're doing. They're a Christian organization. They've been around for 30 years, started by a pastor that just had a heart to help a family in his church. And what it is it's these families that have no safe family, that you're just coming alongside them. You're trained well, you're resourced well, and you've got a community already. They're everywhere. So you can go online, you can find them, but you can also just everything that Pastor Dwayne has said, you can go and Google. I'm not a big fan of Google, but the truth is we can go on these days. I don't have to flip through the yellow pages or wait for somebody to come around my church and tell me some of the solutions. I can go and find them literally at the click of a couple of buttons. What are some housing solutions in my area? What are some foster age out foster care solutions in the area? What are some widow solutions in the area? Because all of these areas are areas of vulnerability that lead to homelessness, that lead to being trafficked, and lead to a life of darkness.
Yeah. And we actually talk about learning. We have someone on that's listening, Jim Walsh. He leads something called Oasis in Paterson, New Jersey, that helps young families, that helps women and children, wraparound services. And he brings me in now and then to train their staff. And what's amazing is some of the kids that have been served in the after school like lunch programs and different things they've done through the summers and they have grown up, got college graduated, and are interning and now reaching kids just like they were those kids in the community. So I want to give it up to Jim at Oasis. Amazing resources. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and just mention a couple of the things that you've been able to do through Oasis there in Paterson.
No, I really appreciate all the work that you do and the learning that I was able to achieve from you too, and continue to learn from you. We serve a very diverse population, and human trafficking has been around, but nobody talks about it, right? So, and one of the things I find that dealing with our diverse community is building the trust. Because nobody likes to ask for help, number one. Number two is building that trust, building that relationship, being not judgmental. So when people get to know you and start talking to you and feel that togetherness, then they'll open up to you. Then we're able to provide various services, whatever they need. You know, the human trafficking training is so important. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to get you in for my interns again.
Funny thing is, one of the interns that you just brought out, we took her on a tour of the local survivor home that we helped open. She goes to the church that helped start that. And the church that we also did the family promise in. So it's just a full circle moment. You may not have realized that you introduced us to her. Yes. She was new to the area. So that's just a funny thing that just happened. So talking about moving into sustainability, not just housing, but employment, building those basic skills. I was starting to mention, we worked with a national bank. I sat down with one of the leaders in the national bank and said, because that's a very upward mobile opportunity. A lot of times they'll pay for your education, once you work there a certain amount of time. So I said, what would it look like if your bank created a pathway forward for an entry-level employee? What would that look like? And so she began to just break that down and started to, teach various parts of that. And once the survivors reached a certain part in the induction phase home. So again, I want everyone that's listening to think about the skill sets you have that are so important. She also did financial literacy and that kind of thing. I know Dwayne, where we worked there's a company that will actually train individuals to get their licensing in insurance and their securities license, and in some state their mortgage licensing. So they could do what I love is because survivors have about twice the rates of PTSD as combat military. So sometimes they have to pause, right? In their recovery, and if they're in an education program, a job or something, when they get about a trauma, they need to pause and take care of themselves and in a way that won't penalize them. And so we've identified these kinds of companies that invest, but let them work at their own pace, can be done remotely. We look for those kinds of resources. I know, Anne Marie, you have, specific to survivors, there have been some developed resources. We had a conversation not long ago. What are some of the employment opportunities, CatchNet for survivors of human trafficking, or some of the not for families as well? And by the way, survivors of human trafficking oftentimes are moms. And so sometimes we help equip churches, and part of that comprehensive response is building like foster care resources. So we work on all sides of the issue. Foster care, some people, if you don't know, foster care, the end game, the end plan is reunification. So sometimes a survivor is coming into a residential program that doesn't have accommodation for children. So we have churches that will foster their children. So they feel like, I'm not just going to lose my kids in some system somewhere. And then also we've been able to help get reunification, even if we're not fostering those children after the fact, because sometimes part of their victimhood, they've made bad decisions sometimes that have harmed their children. And so if they're in a safe place, if they are doing well, helping build those bridges. Adoption is part of that as well, if that's needed. But for the most part, that's considered a failed foster if a child goes into adoption. Not no one failed, but it's just like their plan is to connect with their biological parents again. So in those spaces of protecting family, that kind of thing, sometimes they need skill sets. They may not know basic information. They may not have a skill set that is marketable. So finding those, for reentry home, we have reentry homes. Churches are opening up reentry homes for these individuals so that, if they don't have supportive family or a safe place to go after they go through the program, the year-long program, there is a different option for them. And then the church can wrap around those resources, help with different, if they need parenting, if they need trauma recovery, if they need job skills, all of that wraparound stuff that can happen while they are being served by the local church and housed. But again, just like y'all mentioned, having a pathway forward to self-sufficiency, to that independence. So Anne-Marie, some of those job opportunities we mentioned, again, because a survivor of human trafficking often is a mom or a parent, and so we're talking about families here. Can you talk about some of the resources that you find very helpful?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love that you mentioned that some of them are moms. Most of them are moms. Most of them are single moms, because that's just what happens in this lifestyle. And I say lifestyle, but those aren't the choices they're making, but the lifestyle that they find themselves in. And oftentimes it really starts at getting a basic education, being able to get a GED, and most of us can help a girl or a woman get through a test, sitting there helping them pace out, what is their needs to learn math. And get past the math test. That really not only bumps up their self-esteem, but it also makes them more eligible for other jobs out there, at least makes them believe they're eligible for more jobs out there. But there are resources specific to women who have experienced domestic violence and sexual assault or trafficking. One of the groups that I always recommend that a survivor go through is Elevate Academy for Rebecca Bender. It's an online free professional development courses that is completely trauma informed and survivor led. So it's led by individuals that know that it's not always easy to stay on a schedule. It's not always conducive that I'm going to be ready to take a class every Monday at 6 o'clock because of the things that I might still be going through or healing from. But also there's courses like Annie Cannon's. Annie Cannon's is a wonderful organization that not only trains women online to learn technical skills, computer skills, but then puts them into the workforce, helps them find a job in that workforce. And working online there's so many opportunities for that today. And also that might be a safer environment for some of our survivors than going out and maybe working in a workforce where they're being challenged day to day. So those are just two of them, but really, I when I get on the soapbox of work opportunities, I start at the basic education level, their basic identity, being present with them and bringing them into the community, making them feel loved and valued. That's where it starts. Them knowing their identity, knowing their value in Christ really bumps them up to saying, yeah, I can do something more. But then it doesn't end there. Walking that out. Where are you applying? Did you have any trouble with the application? Do you have a driver's license? Those are some basic questions that a lot of us take for granted, but that just aren't a yes for most of the women that I've worked with.
And that's
So
one of the,
I love, go ahead.
no, I was just, what you
No,
just said
please,
right
go
there, that's a huge thing
Yeah.
because as a survivor or you've gone through multiple traumas, just having no after no, and you try to overcome. I'll just give you a case in point. We had a survivor who was trafficked as a young girl in the system, and she went through the recovery program as a young adult, and she really wanted to go to college, a particular college, and she had a 7th grade education, and she thought, oh, how do I do this? And again, learning how to overcome hard things, that wait a minute, I can keep trying. And for her, she got all the way to the point where she was approved everything, but she had to fill out the application for college, and she had to have a parent sign.
Mm-hmm.
And that just took the wind out of her. That was the no. She's like, I can't figure that one out. And we had a friend that was helping lead her program. And she's like, we will sign for your family. We will be your family.
Yeah.
And like, but I mean, just all of those roadblocks you mentioned, like just thing after thing after thing, that's so important. So like, I'll walk with you. We'll figure this out together. Because if she had to figure that out by herself without having a community, she couldn't have even said out loud, hey, I don't know where else to go. So being that community, like you're saying, I'm sorry to interrupt. No, I just wanted to, when you said that phrase, I just had to latch onto it.
No, it's huge, and I get it. So depending on where your circle of influence is, I've had the honor to speak to Rotary clubs and Chamber of Commerce because, we're looking at business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders. We all have an area that we can speak into. And the first thing, and I've spoken with higher education leaders as well. And the first thing I ask them is, do you ask for a driver's license on your application? And really, is that necessary? Because if you think about it, most jobs don't require you to drive, but it's one of those roadblocks that says, "Yeah, I don't qualify." It's the first thing on the application, so I can't work there because I don't have a driver's license. I have a state identification at best. And when we think about a driver's license, for us, it might seem like a no-brainer. Oh, you can go get that. It takes $25 and, I'll take you down there and you get it taken care of. Well, it's not that easy for most. Again, the learning, a lot of times learning is a real challenge. So for me, I've found, just by way of necessity, courses online for the Oklahoma, because I'm in Oklahoma written driver's test where you can do practice tests is what I'm trying to come up with. You can do practice tests. So I encourage the women, do the practice test. Hey, have you done the practice test today? How'd you do on the last one? Which ones did you get wrong? How can I help her get past that stone in the road, if you will, so that she can get to that next level of opportunity that she's seeking. So I am often just, again, it's one at a time. It's being willing, being available, being committed to that relationship that God has called us to within each other, to say, what are your needs, and how can I help you accomplish them?
Right.
One of the things that happens too is not, I don't know, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that we also see that was coming out of the jail was someone just spent 2 years in jail, and now they're out and they're coming and they're trying to get a job and they can't find a job. They can't find anything. They can't live with their family, so they're in just a room, and their family is someplace else because they can't live with their family, and there's no jobs. And what we have to work with, which is an alternative, is having them start a business. And it might not be, we all think of starting a business. We think of but you know what? You could be mowing lawns. You can do a lot of other things where handyman, where you just get some tools, and we were able to. One of the things is because you were mentioning going online and practicing. The small business the SBA has a program where you can write a business plan, so that some of these guys can go out there and they can understand. They may not use it for an SBA loan, but they can go and they can put together a business plan for a small business that they can use to help themselves start a business, whether they're going to be mowing lawns, whether they're going to be a handyman, whether they're going to be walking dogs, whether they're going to be doing some basic repairs. There's one guy I know that all he did was he was able to get a vehicle, and he would go fix tires. He wasn't a super, but he had a jack, he had some things, and you got a flat, he would be able to go help you with the flats. He wasn't making millions, but he's taking care of himself. He had, and the biggest thing about it is when you start taking care of yourself, you feel better about yourself, and you're not in that situation where you do something out of desperation, where you try and hide or get away from by taking drugs, or you feel you have no choice but to do something you don't want to do. And so there's opportunities in a way of getting educated. I agree with you, Emery. Education is important. There are programs where you don't have to sit in the classroom. You can take tests and get you can actually get an associate's degree with some places where you just take tests. You don't actually go and sit in the class for 6 or 7 weeks or 12 weeks. You take tests. Getting those people, or getting a certificate for something, you're just investing in them in a
Yeah.
mighty way to encourage them. But the biggest thing is you have to be there to encourage them or walk with them or guide them or direct. There's not everybody be like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And sometimes you got to stay on top of them to do it. And that was one of the things I see with the guys that came out of jail. They had no place to go. They had no business. They didn't know, and they started looking at breaking in cars and said, no, let's find something else that you can do. It's just something that you have to work with. But anyway,
Like what you both said before, that mindset of, even if you grew up with a certain mindset, you have a mindset, a limitation mindset, just talking to someone that can just spell out the opportunities, like, hey, let's troubleshoot this. What do you know? What do you enjoy? What can you do? I think that's a big part of that conversation. Just opening our minds to understand we could do so much more,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was, I don't know who mentioned it. It may have been Jim, but the trust factor is critical. I mean, we're dealing with a vulnerable group of people who have been hurt and have little faith in humanity and may not feel like God has been there for them. But I want to encourage people that people are people, they're not projects. And so when we come alongside someone, we're coming alongside them from the heart of Jesus, just to be in relationship with them and learn more about them. When you do that, you've got to also be a little vulnerable yourself. You got to be willing to play a part in this relationship. You're not just there to fix them or handle them or or check off the check boxes for them, but instead help them help themselves. And you do that by having a relationship with them. Can I speak to Dee's comment in the
Sure.
chat
Oh, I didn't see
real
it.
quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Dee, I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much. It's definitely a challenge. Mandy mentioned early on one of the challenges with homelessness is dogs. Having pets that you love and cherish and you don't want to get rid of, but having no place to go because of those animals. And I would say I'm encouraged because I'm finding more and more shelters providing opportunities for our pets. But also I'm seeing more and more organizations out there willing to come alongside individuals and families that are in a season where maybe their pets aren't safest with them or aren't as well cared for with them, that they are then coming in and saying, I'll take the pet for a while, kind of like a fostering family. It's so great. One of the organizations I think of is Pause for a Pause. They help out with women that have been incarcerated or women that are going into a shelter long term. They'll foster the dog. They'll stay in connection with the woman, updating her. The dog is still the woman's dog, but he or she is being taken care of while she's walking out that healing or while they're walking through that season of challenge and until they can create a space that's safest for their loved one.
With what they have. And that's the big story of this. One of the areas I wanted to make sure we mentioned, because it was kind of part of the conversation, we talked about those that were in a pregnancy crisis situation. We are working to coach and open homes in a couple of different states for exactly that. Just know things are emerging in different states and you can be part of those solutions. If you heard of a solution that, I know Pastor Emery put a couple of links in the chat, but if you heard a solution that you want to learn more, or if you want to learn more, some of the resources that Dwayne mentioned as well, we're available to help your group, you personally, like we can help bring these resources to bear so you can explore things that might help you or a loved one or someone within your community or your family that needs help. So those are just all resources that are available to you. Thank you, Jim, for hopping on. Thank you for those that have joined and have to hop off. But I just wanted to, we have just a few more minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. Again, if you are watching this later on and you see it on social media or you see the link on YouTube, you can put questions there as well. We'll try to make this information available so you can share it, and we will continue to open or answer those questions as best we can. So with that, I wanted to mention there is an organization called Mercy Multiplied that was created in the 80s that is specifically for teenage girls who are going through crisis, not just pregnancy, but it's a mixed population. Human trafficking is part of it. But again, you're talking about family. That first victim of human trafficking I assisted, she was a teenage pregnant girl. and she was being trafficked by her much older boyfriend, and they lived in a forest. You think, well, cities, no, it can be in rural communities, it can be in all sorts of places. So I just wanted to alert you, there's some national organizations we didn't mention. Mercy Multiplied is one of them. They have such a great success rate there in multiple states. I just wanted to put their name out there. Dwayne and Anne-Marie, is there something additional that you wanted to kind of mention? We didn't get to kind of cover that topic. Again, some of these topics we're touching on, we're covering more thoroughly later in that concentration. But again, because it's so interwoven, the issue of families and the vulnerability to human trafficking, which is homelessness, that really does intersect all of our lives. Anne-Marie, did you say you have something you want to share?
Well, we are all just a one step away from that, honestly. And with the economy and the way the world is, you just don't know where it's going to turn. I hope Dee heard me, but if she didn't, Dee, I just want you to know, to hear your voice makes me smile. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming out and being a voice. I think it's so critical. And yes, children and children of disabilities are certainly a vulnerable population. I also see a lot of our elderly in that vulnerable population as well. And I don't presume to know your age, but I certainly have seen firsthand women of an older generation being sex trafficked, and most people would think, oh, they're only going after these young, cute girls, but that's just not the reality. We talk about perversions. They run the gamut of what men and women are out there are looking to get their next, whatever. The evils that run rampant are seeking vulnerabilities, and so wherever you see a vulnerability in any of these branches, pregnant moms is certainly one of them. We have several organizations in the area that help out with unplanned pregnancies. It's something that as I've identified root causes, I've tried to come alongside those organizations to let them know and to feed them volunteers so that we're there at the root of it, trying to prevent these crimes from happening. And that's really where we want to be. We want to be more preventative than reactionary. So when we start looking at these situations, and we're blessed to walk alongside these women, know that God is also gifting us with a vision for the future of what we can do to step in and intervene and avoid these things from happening. So stepping alongside unplanned pregnancies, stepping into foster care situations, or girls that are aging out of foster care. Almost 80% of girls, and the statistics are not my favorite because they're wrong. They're low, but they say about 80% of girls within the first 48 hours of aging out of foster care will be trafficked. So foster care, women that are widowed and on very slim incomes. There's all these vulnerabilities that we've talked about today, and opportunity to step into them that might not be labeled trafficking, but let's step in before the crime occurs. Let's step in before there is hurt and some experience that they then have to heal from, and let's try to prevent it and make a better space.
Yeah, I think the most vulnerable population really are children without family. And so, like you said, again, that's not human trafficking, but the fact that they are, again, the focus of this is the underlying issue is homelessness, right? And so kids that are homeless, that are displaced from family, are at highest risk. And so if we can come alongside and be family. And I love the fact that Pastor Anne-Marie mentioned how looking at a person not as a project, right? So it's really important that if we see the equal humanity. We see, for me, it was not a big stretch because I have family members. When I see someone on a park bench, I see a family member because I know people who've walked through traveler syndrome. I know who, and I'll just say, because a lot of people don't know about that situation, and we'll talk about it a little bit when we do the veterans talk conversation. But a lot of people don't realize that this pushes people to keep moving. And, we help all kinds of people in different ways. But this particular individual, we ended up, he hitchhiked to our home. He stayed in our home for a couple of days. And then he said, it's time for me to go. And he said, can you drop me off on Interstate 80, if you know, it goes east to west. And that was the hardest thing because it's his choice. You can't help an adult who's not, they want to change, if they want to change, right? And so understanding our limitations, like Pastor Emmy mentioned, trauma informed, really essential to any way you help a survivor of human trafficking is giving them choice, reinstituting choice again. And so honoring their choice and figuring out, okay, how can I connect you with what will help you within the criteria you've given me, because it's your life, your choice, and I'm here to help in any way I can. And also one of the challenges, Pastor Emmy, which I know you know, and Dwayne, you as well, is your heart, right? Because you love people, and some people that are vulnerable and in these situations might be family, people you're related to. But you have to, later we'll talk about addiction as well in another one, but they have to want to get help. And that's hard, when your heart hurts when you're helping hurting people, and we're all really hurting, right? And so it's really important that no matter where we are, that if someone is walking through trauma and we're walking with them, or we're walking through the trauma of assisting someone with trauma, that we commit to self-care, soul care, we process and debrief ourselves, because we do ourselves and no one else any benefit if we are immobilized with trauma or hatred, or if we're murderous ourselves because we're so angry about what happened to somebody, or if we're so depressed, we're not helping anyone at that point. So it's really important. Before we finish up, I would just want to say, does anyone want to say on this call, or any one of our speakers, what helps you process things? What helps you even self-care, and how has that being disciplined about doing that, how has that helped you? And can you just share about your journey about that?
I think one of the biggest things we have to understand is that we're not islands, we're not single individuals, and that we need to have I don't want to say accountability, but we need to have for lack of a better word, a tribe or a group or something. When we hear all these different ideas and different things that can come together, we need to have people with us, beside us, that we're not just simply walking out there doing it by ourselves. We're not just simply walking in a void, and we think we're going to walk beside somebody, but nobody's walking with us, or we're not part of a group. Together we can do so much more, to where one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. Think about what we can accomplish when we come together. And I think it's very important that we get folks together, groups together. Not only that, there's opportunities, and I'm going to just step out of it. When you get a group together, there's opportunities to get grants and do more than we think with our own resources, to expand our resources and do other things. So the biggest thing I believe is, and that's why I'm on boards, because I believe teams and boards can do more than individuals. And you can also look at the health of other individuals and to speak to those other individuals about, you've got to be careful, you've got to watch where you're going, you've got to watch what you're doing. How can I support you in this? But I think the biggest thing is not to be alone in what you're doing, and to get like-minded, and then with that, spend time in prayer and time in the presence of the Lord, and then spend time there, because anything we do in our own strength is not going to last. It's going to weigh on us. Where we're in His strength, we can accomplish and do so much more than we ever think or than we can ever imagine.
Pastor Emery, did you have something to say?
Absolutely. No, I just want to echo that, and also kind of just be so grateful for Can Freedom, because truly that's what it's about, the church and the community, and this group of abolitionists seeking freedom. If you're doing it alone, first and foremost, let me just put the safety caution out there. Don't. You can't do anything alone. God created Adam and Eve to join Him in the garden. We had the disciples. Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. It's not safe to do anything alone, and we're not created to do anything alone. So certainly we have God, but God wants 2 or more to gather. I need my church and I need my community. So Pastor Dwayne said tribe. That's certainly my tribe. They're a warrior group around me. I have an intercessory group that prays over me on a constant basis. I have them on demand when I'm in an immediate situation, those that are in confidence that I can share information with, that they can pray specifically and immediately in the midnight witching hour, if you will. So I just want to reiterate it. we want to do this, but we have to do it with wisdom and discernment, and we have to do it together. And that's what keeps me healthy, my spiritual health, my devotional time with God, making sure that I have carved out that time for my personal spiritual health is critical. So being at church is vitally important to me. I go and I pour out, but I have to be replenished, and then I have to have people that I can link up with, pray for, and be prayed over.
That's so good. And it's one of the reasons why we created what we call the Can Abolition Advocate. They're the point person within the church to help lead the ministry. Because if you do it on your own, the church is already that automatic community. Some people have senior pastors that don't understand how important or relevant this is to their congregation or their community. We can help start a conversation, or you can do an outreach. And a lot of times our missing children's outreach is the thing. They're like, and the pastor's like, oh, that wasn't putting congregants in danger. And that really was a really insightful and effective. And so sometimes we can help you start something in a little way. And then the pastor's like, you know what, we can start this. We can start doing this on a regular basis. And again, we do it. Our Can Abolition Advocates operate as a ministry of the church. So you're accountable to your pastor, your board, whomever, whatever your church structure is. So it's effective. It's supported that way naturally with people, with prayer, with resources. If you need prints, if any other department, they can do prints, you can do prints. So we like to set you up so you're supported. So if you want to inquire about that position, if you want to start something, or maybe you're like, I can see my pastor might want to just do an action and then we can go from there. We can get you connected so you can start that conversation in your church, because what churches are building are amazing. We had one church in the tri-state area created resources for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And again, the unique niche that they were, the things that even in translating the word human trafficking, they were able to advise their attorney general and help build that response specific to that culture. And so specific areas where your church is, what your experiences within business, within community, within family, all of that we can leverage for freedom. And so we want to help build these resources locally. So if you want to learn more, you can email us via the canfreedom.org website, but we just want to be available to you.